Well, they closed down the mill and they closed down the mine. They said you can't work but pay your taxes on time. Got 3 little babies gonna starve to death or freeze. We started making white lightning, it was Grandpa's recipe. Run, rebel, run to nowhere. Run, rebel, run to the Scott County Jail.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Sunday night. You're locked in for the next hour on the Jailhouse Informant podcast with myself and my co-host, Dr. Christy Sumner. Hey, Christy.
Hey, Miranda. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful, and we hope everyone else is too on this beautiful mid-April afternoon. I can't believe it's already mid-April.
Mid-April. It's nuts how fast this year is flying by, but we've had a lot of great things go on. This last weekend was a lot of fun. Think you're going to pull up some things here, but we had our blessing of the bikes this last Saturday or yesterday. We want to thank everybody for coming out. So just a few pictures of that event. There's Sally. She had her little Harley Davidson helmet on, so she was ready to go to welcome all the bikers that came in. And we do appreciate all the bikers that stopped by. We had Dean's Pit Stop. They were our food vendor here for the event, and amazing food. If you're in the Scott County area, find Dean's Pit Stop and get yourself some food, because just amazing menu of amazing food. Just had a really good time with them being here.
And they a lot of the time have a lot of their favorites that people get whenever they see them through the week up in Oneida. But then they also have special things that they will put on the menu for these special events. So if you hear that Dean's Pit Stop is doing some special event, you need to go to that special event just for Dean's Pit Stop, because I mean, they had an amazing steak and bacon burger or sandwich that I had.
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh.
I just had the cheeseburger and it was fantastic. So highly recommend them. Of course, again, we thank you for the bikers that came out. We thank the Christian Motorcyclist Association, number 1256, that came out and did our blessings of the bikes. Just a great group of people all the way around, very enthusiastic. Of course, the bikes, they would just come in, they would park under the tent and have about a 5-minute blessing over their bike, just really protecting them and their rides this year. So that was kind of how the blessing of the bike actually worked.
Yeah, and want to pull up another picture here. I've got to pull it up from a different spot, so please bear with me as I do that. But we had a lot of local people, as well as a lot of people from out of town come by, and we had a couple bikers that came all the way up from Chattanooga, which is about a 2-hour ride from here. This is the CMA Christian Motorcyclist Association group that did the blessing of the bikes. They were out of Jacksboro, Tennessee, which is in the neighboring county of Campbell County. So we appreciate them driving over. Or riding over, actually. We already have next year's date set, which is always exciting whenever you can plan ahead just like that. And then also, like I said, we had some special guests to pop in. We want to really thank Mayor Dennis Jeffers here from Huntsville, Tennessee, who stopped by. He sat and had some lunch with us. He also went by and talked to the bikers that were here and the folks that were involved in the event. And so we really appreciate him taking the time out of his busy day to come by and join in the celebration.
Yeah, Dennis is one of our biggest supporters, and everything that we do here, Dennis is behind it 100%. So we do thank Mayor Jeffers for coming out and hanging out with us yesterday and having some food from Dean's Pit Stop. So that was really cool.
Yeah, yeah. And so again, we've got next year's date planned for that. I think it's going to be falling on April 13th. So what a great day for the third annual Blessing of the Bike event. Also, another event that's going to be coming up here very soon. It's going to be coming up next month, and that is the third annual Harold Young Memorial Scholarship Dart Run. And, you know, I know some of you folks over in the chat room here have participated in this in the past. You don't have to be here at the event physically. We will have something set up to where you can make donations. But my dad, he was a 30-year educator. He educated in the field of science, chemistry, and physics in particular. And we are creating a scholarship. He passed away in 2019 suddenly. And so we're creating a scholarship for a student at Scott High School that is majoring in the field of science. And so that could be anything from, you know, a nurse, pharmacist, science teacher, what our guest tonight is.
Yeah.
We'll get to here shortly, but it is giving $1,000 scholarship. And so this is the third year we've been able to do that. Last year, we gave it to a lady that was going to school to be a nurse. And so what a dart run is you will stop at 3 locations. And it is a game of skill. You will stop and play 3 games, or you will play a hand of darts at these 3 locations. And it's $20. That does include your meal ticket as well. And so after that, we will also be presenting to this year's winner of this year's scholarship. So have more information about that. We also will have some videos and stuff from the past dart runs that we will be sharing over the next little bit. But that is Saturday, May 20th. So we hope that you guys will plan to come out and join us on that for this cause. It keeps that scholarship going.
Yeah, so. It's a great event. So everybody stay tuned for the information on that.
And I will say, I did forget to mention that we are partnering with the Widow's Sons Masonic Writers Association. My dad was a 50-year Mason. And so, so it's very important that we are partnering with them. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, good
and
stuff.
So, like I said, lots of other great things going on here.
Yeah. Just stay posted on our website and our Facebook page, and you'll be up to date on everything that as it comes. We are working on some very cool things for the summer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in November of last year, I'm from Ocala. So I was down in Ocala, Florida, and I happened to be going to Barnes & Noble, and I was at Barnes & Noble when the store opened. So I was there when they opened the doors, and walking in front of me was this very dapper gentleman in a tuxedo. And I thought, wow, he is very well overdressed for going into Barnes & Noble. I wonder what he's buying today. And so I went and got my purchases, and I was going back up to buy those purchases. And lo and behold, the gentleman in the tuxedo was actually signing some books. And I just passed by his table, and I looked at the title of the book, which was, Forensics, the Scientific Study of Death. And I just had to turn around. I had to know what this gentleman was selling, what he was about, why he was in a tuxedo. And I just fell in love with Harry. We talked for a while there at Barnes & Noble. I ended up buying his books because he's such a great salesman. And then I read the books, and it was fantastic. So we're very fortunate to have him here on the show tonight. So let's welcome Dr. Harry Milman. Hey, Harry.
Hey, Dr. Milman.
Well, call me Harry. As a start, I'm very informal. Unless you, I always tell people, unless you see me in court where I testify, and at that time you can call me Dr. Milman. But now we're all friends here, and let's keep it informal. And thank you very much for that introduction, because I really enjoyed my time there at Barnes & Noble in Ocala. That was my first time there. I met Chrissy as well as many others. And interestingly enough, I think Chrissy bought my first forensics book. It's Forensics, the Science Behind the Deaths of Famous People. And since then, I published my second one, a sequel, mainly because everybody wanted another one. So that's called Forensics 2, the Science Behind the Deaths of Famous and Infamous People. And interestingly enough, just maybe 2 weeks ago or so, one of the buyers in Ocala, who I met when I was there last time and bought the first book, like Chrissy, saw that I had now a sequel, and she wanted a copy. She asked me, through Facebook. She asked me if I'm coming back to Ocala, and of course, at the moment, I don't have any plans. I'm kind of waiting because I'm writing Forensics 3 now, so I'll probably come
great.
back. I'll probably come back with Forensics 3. So she wanted, she understood that you can buy Forensics 2 online through, for example, either through Barnes & Noble or Amazon or my website, forensicsfamouspeople.com. But she wanted, one, to meet me in person, and two, she wanted an autographed copy. So obviously she can't meet me in person at the moment, so she was willing to have me ship her an autographed copy of Forensics 2. So she was very excited, and so that's kind of my latest interaction with the Ocala
area. Absolutely. And everybody, I gotta say, like I said, when I met Harry at Barnes and Noble there, we talked for a while, and as he said before, you really kind of part as friends, right? He takes your picture, he posts it on Facebook, you join his mailing list, and it's nothing obnoxious. It's fun, and he's a great person to talk to. I think we sat for probably about 15 minutes there in Barnes and Noble, just talking about your background and how you wrote the books and how you really got started in this. So why don't you share a little bit about that, kind of like how you got to this point that you're at right now?
Thank you. One of the reasons I do all these book signings is because I enjoy meeting my potential fans, and of course telling them all about what I do, and they in turn get to meet me. So why don't I do that now with your audience, who I hope by the end of this hour will know me pretty well, and don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. You can send me an email at Milman, M-I-L-M-A-N, milmanauthor@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook. So just a quick background. I like to start like way back in high school, because I know that many of your viewers are could be either high school or college students who are wondering what they're going to do with their life. And when I was in your situation, when I was a senior in high school, and I was good in math. If I could tell you, I was not very good in science. Okay. I was good in physics, for example, which is math oriented, but not necessarily chemistry. And so I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer. I was good in math. I liked electricity. I used to do a lot of projects on my own in electricity. I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer. My parents, this is back 1961. Things were a little bit different than they are today. And back then, your parents told you what you're going to be. And nowadays, we kind of, at least I'm a parent, and I kind of I wanted my daughters to make their own decisions. So back then, your parents told you, well, in my case, you're going to be a pharmacist. And why is that? Because we had a couple of cousins, an uncle who were pharmacists. They all had their drugstores. They were doing well. It's a profession. I'm sure many of you heard those kind of arguments before. And not only that, when you finish pharmacy school, you can always go to medical school.
Right.
The idea that I didn't want to be a doctor, that never came into the picture. So being an obedient son, I said fine. So I went to pharmacy school, which is basically a lot of science. Pretty much every biological science imaginable, microbiology, chemistry, biology, anatomy, you name it, as well as pharmacy courses. But it basically, at the end of 5 years, as a pharmacist, it teaches you how to, how and the background of the pharmaceuticals related to dispensing of drugs, dispensing in the pharmacy. Okay, so that was my bachelor's in pharmacy, and after that, during my bachelor years, I was also working part-time in a drugstore, and I knew that wasn't the life that I wanted to have. Especially in New York, you work till 11 o'clock at night. You work on weekends. So I worked 2 nights a week, and I alternate between Saturday and Sunday. And the thing that I really hated was when I worked on Sunday, 9 to 9, a 12-hour shift, and everybody else was going to the beach, and I was there, waiting for them to come back for their sunscreen. I knew right away this was not for me.
Right.
I still didn't know what I wanted to do, mind you, but I knew that wasn't for me. And so I finished my bachelor's, and then my bachelor's was at Columbia University College of Pharmacy at the time. That's New York City. And then after that, I went for a master's at St. John's University in Jamaica, New York, which is in Queens, for a master's. Now, when I went for my master's, a master's program, any advanced degree program in the sciences, at least, is a research program.
Right.
So I took my master's, did a research project for my thesis, and the research project dealt with inhalation of pharmaceuticals.
Oh, cool.
So in order to do that kind of research, I worked with guinea pigs, administering drugs by inhalation to guinea pigs, and then looking at their lungs and see, what happens. So that kind of research I liked. And that kind of research, as it turns out, is called pharmacology.
Okay.
Which is, administering drugs to biological systems, in this case, guinea pigs. And so now I knew, I kind of like pharmacology, and I wanted to do research. I didn't know what kind. I was willing to do any kind of research, but basically in this area. So that was 2 years. And then after that, this is 1968 now. And then I got a job with the federal government, working on an Indian reservation in Minnesota for 2 years as a pharmacist in the outpatient clinic on the reservation. I was the first pharmacist there.
Wow.
And 2 years working on the reservation fulfilled my military obligation. If you remember, that was 1968. So that's the Vietnam War. So 2 years working as a pharmacist on the Indian reservation fulfilled my military obligation. So for me, that meant, 1, fulfilling my military obligation, and 2, getting into the federal system, which is something I wanted to do. And 3, I knew that part of the federal system is the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, which is the world's best research organization. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I wanted to get into the NIH, and I looked working as a pharmacist on Indian reservation as a means to an end. And so, and just to be clear, I wasn't going to go alone from 9 million people to 3 houses on top of a hill, nothing but snow and trees. So I got married 10 days earlier. Okay?
There you go. Good job, Harry.
And I got married 10 days earlier, and at the end of 2 years, by the way, I felt that anybody who can last 2 years on Indian reservation is good enough to keep, and so we're still married today. And I'm only 39.
There you go.
Okay? So 2 years on the Indian reservation, and during those 2 years, I constantly applied to the NIH for a job in research. I didn't know what kind of research. I just wanted research. And make a long story short, bugging them day in, day out with phone calls and letters, which is what I recommend for all you youngsters in terms of, once you know what you want, it's up to you to keep at it. and go for it. And nobody's going to come for you because they have their own commitments and their own priorities. So there's nobody who's more interested in you than you.
Absolutely.
So I would say, so you got to keep at it. And I kept at it for 2 years until they say, fine, we'll give you a job. And I got a job at the laboratory toxicology of the National Cancer Institute. So that's how I got into toxicology. And the laboratory toxicology of the National Cancer Institute I did toxicology, pharmacology, biochemistry, of anti-cancer drugs. We did research, and it was a very busy laboratory.
I'm sure.
Within 10 years, I published 5 books, many scientific papers. My boss thought within 6 months, he thought I was good enough to go for a PhD, and that I should go for a PhD, and I was good enough for a PhD. And I looked, and I wanted to stay at the NIH, as my career. So I looked around, and all my competition was MDs and PhDs. So I knew that if I want to stay, I really should go for a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
The NIH helped me get into George Washington University Pharmacology Department for a PhD program. They paid for my schooling. My boss became my advisor. I did my thesis on the job. The only thing I had to do was hold a job full time, go to school full time, and study. Well, I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah, it's no easy task.
Right.
But good job.
Right. So 14 years of college and 10 years at the Cancer Institute, followed by 18 years at the Environmental Protection Agency as a toxicologist and cancer expert. When I retired from the Federal Service in 1998, I was a toxicology and cancer expert, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So within 2 years, somebody recommended me to testify in court as an expert. I liked that experience. I set up a website, and I've been testifying as a toxicology, pharmacology, pharmacy errors, and cancer, environmental cancer, cancer from chemicals, if you will. Both for defense and plaintiff for about 350 cases over the last 24 or so years.
Now, not to interrupt real quick. So when you're an expert like that and somebody calls you in on a case, do you have to go in and actually just really delve into that case, or do you just kind of give your opinion on the circumstances behind it? How does that actually work?
Right. So the way it works is, one, I don't do any laboratory work, if that's kind of the question. That already has been done by a pathologist, and others. So what I do, so the attorney finds me on the web, and my resume is there, and he thinks I have the experience. And frankly, in my view, you would never find anybody better, because I can cover 4 areas.
Right.
One of me is cheaper than 4 of them, if you know what I mean. So he can get, because a lot of times there's overlap, between pharmacology and toxicology and whatever. So so he finds me, we talk on the phone, he tells me a little bit about the case. It's a balancing act between because what I'm selling my knowledge. And so it's a balancing act between how much do you tell them versus how much do you tell them to make them feel that you know what you're talking about, So, and not get paid for any of that. So, but we talk on the phone, and generally speaking, I can convince him that I'm I'm the expert that he should get. And then, so depending on the process it's, when he gets me in the process. So the process can take, let's say, 2 years from beginning to trial.
Wow.
And during that time period, he provides me a lot of information, either electronically or on paper, about for example, what happened, what happened, then medical records, autopsy reports, police reports, laboratory work, laboratory studies, and I, on my side, also research the scientific literature, get relevant scientific papers, and eventually I review all of that stuff that he provided me, as well as what I found and the circumstances surrounding the death, assuming it's a death. But even if it's not a death, if it's just, let's say, a toxic event, you were, for example, a case where, in the mall, and there was some sort of an altercation, and police came and they used pepper spray, and the spray went over into the adjacent store, let's say, and a customer complained that they got all sorts of toxic effects from this pepper spray.
Gotcha.
And now they're suing the mall, and they're suing the police, and you name it,
Okay.
So I get, I get information on the incident. I get information, the police report. Let's say nobody died, right? So that's not an issue. But then I also get about what was sprayed. So then I look up all the ingredients to find out what sort of effect those ingredients do, and see how they match with what the person said that he experienced.
Cool.
You know, and at the doses that we anticipate he received. So there's a lot, and I'll give you some examples in a second. But basically, you review all that stuff, and then you come back with you formulate an opinion. You speak about it with the attorney over the phone, but then you write a report, and that report eventually also goes a copy to the other side. And the process moves along. So the first thing is you evaluate. The second thing, you prepare a report. After that, if it keeps moving, if the process keeps moving, eventually there might be a deposition under oath. Where basically they discuss your report and they ask you 1,001 questions. And usually it's a minimum of 4 hours of questioning, but I've had as many as 16 hours over a 2-day period. And then they keep going. And so this whole idea, in other words, is for each side to know how strong the case is on the other side.
Yep.
Okay. Usually people have told me, I've had some cases where the other side caved just based on my report.
There you go.
Nice.
So they settled before we even went to depositions. But basically, that's what happens. They kind of go with deposition. Of course, along the way, there are various litigation maneuvers. And then if they still want to keep going, they'll go to trial. And then, they try to avoid that for the most part because you never know how the jury will react. So they'd like to depend, especially when they're huge cases, they'd like to settle before trial. But it's implicit. It's implicit, but it's never explicit.
Gotcha.
So,
sorry, we got a cat.
We have a friend here.
Yeah, that's Shelly. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's an interesting process for me. And it's not for everybody, but I like it because it's very academically stimulating. Each case is different. Different drugs, different chemicals, different diseases. You're constantly learning and you're researching and that sort of thing. And so I like it. And I've done about 350 cases. They didn't all go to trial. Most of them, I would say, 80 to 90% actually settled beforehand.
Gotcha.
And I will say that my cases are, let's say, about 90% civil, 10% criminal. But the process is still the same, whether it's criminal or civil. And so any questions before I go into the?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple. I think we've got a couple of examples that you're going to give us. So I'm really excited about that. But during your work at like the NIH and stuff, was there anything that really, for lack of a better term, surprised you or shocked you, or something that what was your, I guess the way what was your greatest achievement at the NIH, I guess, or the greatest eye-opening event?
Yeah. So at NIH, I told you I was in laboratory toxicology, doing toxicology, pharmacology, and biochemistry, and we were looking for new pharmaceuticals to treat leukemia on the one hand, or pancreatic cancer on the other.
Wow.
And so some of these drugs were prepared by a different laboratory, let's say, and then that was involved in the chemistry side, and then it was passed over to us to do the toxicology evaluation. Well, and then we also did the same kind of work, but on existing drugs.
Okay.
So the main existing drug is asparaginase. Asparaginase is an enzyme, and it's an enzyme because it ends with ASE. So asparaginase is an enzyme. It basically it's used in leukemia. It's still used today, and it changes the amino acid asparagine, which has a nitrogen on it, asparagine, to aspartic acid. In other words, it removes the nitrogen from one to the other. So it converts asparagine to aspartic acid. The importance of that is that these leukemia cells that we were studying utilize asparagine for growth. So if we give asparaginase, it removes all the asparagine, and hopefully they die. Now, and they do for a while, but then, as we all know, sometimes the cancer comes back, and the reason it comes back is because it finds a new way of making asparagine. Okay, okay, and that is with another enzyme, another enzyme called asparagine synthetase. Asparagine that synthesizes an enzyme that synthesizes asparagine. Okay, so now we're looking for new drugs that can inhibit the asparagine synthetase. Okay, so that was, and there's a lot of studies that we did around that scenario. And by coincidence, now I got into GW for my PhD program. I had to figure out a thesis, and by coincidence, one day we were looking for asparagine synthetase. So I didn't know what I was going to do for my thesis, right? So one day we were looking for asparagine synthetase in the normal organs and normal tissues, in this case of a mouse, as a surrogate for humans. So my boss said, well, take out the the organs, and let's do an analysis. But he didn't tell me which organs. So having done many of these kind of what we call necropsies, which is basically like an autopsy on a mouse, I took out everything I could see, and so you obviously would take out the liver, the kidneys, the stomach, the brain, each one of these things. But at that time, we were also looking at pancreas for another reason, unrelated. So I also took out the pancreas, and by coincidence, at the end of the day, after I finished all my analysis, lo and behold, as the numbers came in of our evaluation, you find that the pancreas, the normal pancreas of the mouse, had the highest amount of asparagine synthetase, just as high as it would be in that tumor that is resistant to asparaginase. So this was like, and all the other organs were like way low, So this was like an unusual finding, and right away I knew that would be my thesis. You see,
awesome.
Nobody else has found this. This was, this was new. This was something new. Thankfully, my boss gave me credit when he announced it at the, at the lab meeting. But I said, before we agreed, because once we decide, okay, this is it, then I would start doing studies. What happens if it was a mistake? It was like a fluke or something like that. So I had him. So I said, we have to check to make sure that we are measuring what we think we're measuring, but different methods. So, and if they all give you the same answer, then at least we can be more certain that we are measuring asparagine synthetase. So, so we did several methods. One of them, which is a standard radiometric method. I'm not going to go into all the details. And then another one was a more extensive, big instrument that takes a whole room. What's called amino acid analyzer. And sure enough, what we were looking at was asparagine synthetase. And
That's
so
awesome.
now my thesis basically dealt with purifying that enzyme from pancreas and analyzing it for its pharmacological, biochemical, and toxicological effects, and comparing the normal pancreas enzyme with that of the tumor, and see how close are they, if at all.
Very cool.
Now, so one, it was very interesting. Two, I got many scientific papers out of that. And three, it kept me busy, right?
Yeah.
I had a job. It was part. It was for my thesis, but it was also part of my job. And so that was the good thing. On the bad side, it's my boss was my advisor. So, and I happened to be, so I also happened to be a very good worker. So he knew that as soon as I finished, I'm out of here.
Out of here. Yep.
I have a new job. So he kept pushing me forward. Oh, one more experiment. So it took me 7 years and passed my master's to do it. And the thesis was the largest the university ever had. you know, can everybody see that? That's about this big. You go to you go to the pharmacology department at George Washington University, and you look at the, on the shelf, and you can pick mine out right away because it's
the one that's
right 550 pages. Everybody else is about 150 or so.
Goodness.
So
Wow.
and the only way I finally, quote unquote, finished is because I told him I'm done, and he said, "No, you're not. One more experiment." And I said, "No." I said, "I've done everything that we agreed. I've done everything we disagreed, and I'm out, and I'm finished." And anyway, it was like a bad divorce at the end, but I did finish, and I got a lot of papers out of it, and
Very cool.
a lot of good experience, and it was something that was never. That has not been known before, that
Mm-hmm.
the pancreas, and then of course there are other questions now that come from that, like if it's there, why is it there? Why does the pancreas so much asparagine? Asparagus synthase. Why does it do it? And I wanted to follow that,
Mm-hmm.
but circumstances were such, I switched jobs and et cetera, et cetera. But that's the thing about science. You publish, and other people carry the ball from there.
Absolutely.
So every so often I look into scientific literature to see what happened with that field, and I see people are publishing and citing me in their references. So,
very cool.
Very nice.
Oh yeah, so that's cool. And they and my theory is the pancreas has dual functions.
It does.
What we call exocrine and endocrine. Exocrine is digestion, and endocrine is for sugar, diabetes, and that sort of thing. Insulin secretion.
Mhm.
So insulin is a very important part of the pancreas,
Mhm.
and what we call the terminal amino acid. That means the amino acid and the chemical structure. The last one at the very end is asparagine. So I thought, and what I wanted to do was to investigate whether asparagine synthetase is responsible to making sure that there's enough asparagine to get onto that insulin. I mean, if a person doesn't get enough in the diet, this would be a mechanism of which she can still make insulin.
Mhm.
Of course, that's
amazing.
yeah. So it might be. I don't know, but the point is that one, I couldn't do it, and two, even if I was still there, I may not be able to do it because it's not part of the National Cancer Institute mission.
Gotcha.
So somebody hopefully, somebody hopefully is following that scenario. So anyway, so that's what science is all about, and I like that, and
That's a great story.
Yeah. So. I don't know. I hope I answered the question.
You did. You
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we know you have prepared several examples of some cases that you have testified as an expert witness on. Would you like to go ahead and kind of go into some of those examples that you've prepared?
Sure thing. So today, I'm like Dan Rather or something like that, By the way, if you're all wondering why am I wearing a tuxedo, first of all, for me, this is a special occasion. Every time I meet new fans and new podcast hosts, to me, that's a special occasion. When I meet a new cat, that's a special occasion for me. So if it's a special occasion, I wear my tuxedo, and also I wear it at my book signing events, in part because when people come in the door at the book signing events, they're not coming for me. Generally, they're coming to browse, or maybe they have another book. And I wear my tuxedo because it attracts attention. Generally speaking, you never see somebody in a tuxedo in the bookstore, and so people want to know what's it all about, and so they gravitate to me, and then we start a conversation, and then we get to know each other.
Yep.
And they may or may not buy the book, but at least it was I think it was a happy occasion, and we made new friends.
Yep.
So that's there's one picture there of my one of my recent fans who interestingly had already bought those two books, but she bought them online, but she bought them into one of my book signing events recently in Pennsylvania for me to autograph him.
Yep.
Here's another one who did that, the same thing, in I believe in Lancaster. No, in Dallas, Texas.
Mhm.
This is another cutie, who came to my book. She also bought Forensics One. And
Very
this
cool.
and this young lady who I met for the first time in Dallas, Texas. But before that, we met through Facebook,
Mhm.
and she urged me to come to Dallas, so I did, and she came to my book signing event in Texas.
Yep.
Well,
And go
we
ahead.
appreciate you wearing your tuxedo for tonight's special occasion. You want to kind of tell us the story behind why the what got you to wearing got the idea for the tuxedo?
So my first book, my very first book signing event local here at one of the Barnes and Nobles. I never did a book signing event. My book is called A Death at Camp David.
Mhm.
A Death at Camp David. It's available online through any of the online stores. That book, by the way, was just supposed to be for me. A book for me to put on my shelf. I had an idea for a story about a death at Camp David and how it affected the election of a woman running for president of the United States. And the main character I thought would be a forensic toxicologist, so I can take my whole background and experience,
Very
put
cool.
into the main character. Because if you find a body and it's a stabbing or a shooting, well, then how the person died. But if you don't have stabbing or shooting, well, it could have been a natural death, could have been an overdose. You just don't know what happened. So that's why I thought, well, and that's what I wanted. And so this way we can introduce the main character, forensic toxicologist, who will figure it out. And I did. And I thought in that case that it would be very easy to write because it's all based on my background and experience. Well, it took me 2.5 years to write, and I said, thank God it's over. Too much work, too much time, too much effort. I wasn't planning on doing another one. My wife said, why don't you have a book signing event at Barnes and Noble in Rockville there, see if they'll do one. And I did, and I sold out. Now people ask me, what are you writing next? And I wasn't planning on writing anything else. It was too much work. Who has the time for that? So, but people want me to write another one. So I did. And I wrote a space exploration thriller called Soyuz, The Final Flight. And I'm not answering your original question, but we'll get to it. The second book, it's a space exploration thriller about sabotage of the International Space Station. And the way that came about is because I read the book The Martian, and I saw the movie The Martian with Matt Damon. I hope many of you saw it. And for those of you who saw it, one of the highlights there in that movie was that Matt Damon plays an astronaut who's left behind on Mars for a couple of years and now has to survive. And one of the things he does is he grows potatoes on Mars.
Mhm.
And the reason he did that is using his own excrements, I should say, for nitrogen. And the reason he did that is because the author of the book was into botany. And so he wanted to have botany-related issues in space that are real and factual and can actually happen.
Mhm.
And that's how he wound up having Matt Damon grow potatoes on Mars. And when I saw that, I said, shoot, I can do the same thing with toxicology. So I came up with a few toxicology-related problems that can occur in space that are real and factual and could actually happen. And then I built a story around it called Soyuz, The Final Flight, about a space exploration thriller about sabotage on the International Space Station.
Okay.
And that one, besides being in hardcover, softcover, and ebook, is also available as an audiobook. Interestingly enough, it is narrated by the award-winning narrator R.C. Bray, who won awards for narrating The Martian, and he narrated my book.
That's fantastic. Very
So
nice.
yeah, so that's
What
really
a cool connection.
Yeah. So again, everybody liked it, and I was. I don't want to digress any further. I'll digress later, but and tell you how the other two books came about. But we were talking about about giving examples for my law cases. And so what I want to tell you, you viewers and listeners, is that first of all, I'm talking about forensics. And when I talk about, yeah, as we all know, there's many areas of forensics, and I'm not talking about about you know, bullets, entering a body and pathways and that sort of thing. I'm not talking about accounting forensics or any of that sort. What I'm talking about is biological forensics, if you will, about, how does one figure out, how a person died. Basically, what I'm talking about is the areas of, in a nutshell, of autopsies, and on the one hand, and blood work and urine examination for the most part, which is the toxicology area. So that's what I'm talking about. So when we're talking about now, so that's forensics. Forensics basically deals with methodology. How do you do autopsies? How do you do blood work? How do you do urine examination? The actual testing. How do you find new testing methods? Okay, but so but that's only the first part. That is to say, you now have the method and you get results. Now the question is, what do these results mean? Okay, what do they mean? When you see, let's say, an elevated level of opioids, let's say, in the urine, as opposed to an elevated level of opioids in the blood. What does that mean? And I'll tell you before I forget, because I may digress. But if you want to know about impairment, let's say by any drug, but let's use opioids as an example. If you want to know if a person is impaired or was impaired when he was driving or anything of that nature, you need to know not how much was in his urine, but you need to know how much was in his blood, because the blood will tell you a specific amount of. So not only we need to know the presence, but we also need to know the quantity. And in order to get that result, you need to do it two types of tests: one to identify and another one to quantify, and also be more specific. Because and we can get into that. But the point is that the blood work will tell you how much, let's say, of opioids was in his blood at a given point in time. And based on what you already know from the scientific literature, and if you don't know that, you'll research it, then you'll know what sort of effects you're going to have at those concentrations, those blood concentrations of the opioids. Alternatively, if you only have results in urine, as for example in drug testing in the workplace, that only tells you that at some point the person was exposed to opioids. And I use exposed in quotation marks because he may have taken it, he may have been in a room where it was in the atmosphere, there are various ways of being exposed, but it just tells you that at some point he was exposed, but we don't know when. Could have been a week earlier. You don't know how much he was exposed to, and you certainly don't know anything about impairment. So urine does not tell you any of those results. Blood work is what you need.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So, so one, you need to test. You have the results. You have to know what the results mean, and then after that, you have to apply those results to some sort of a normal situation. That would be, generally speaking, in litigation.
Okay.
Where, and I'll give you an example. So now you have results, and you know what it means. Because you have the blood work, you know that a person is impaired at that level, for example. But now, so what? Well, so what comes in litigation. So here's one example. Okay, fairly simple example, but nevertheless answers many of these points.
Okay.
Let me know if I'm speaking too much, because I could go on and on.
No, you're fascinating, Harry.
Okay, so this case was in West Virginia. And as a start, and I was the expert for the prosecution, that is to say, for the state.
Okay.
Okay. Now remember that when we're talking about litigation, the accused is always assumed innocent until proven guilty. Okay, so that means the state has the burden to prove him guilty, and and on his side, the defense, they're going to give you all sorts of reasons why he didn't do it.
Hmm.
Okay, and he doesn't have to prove it. You have to disprove it.
Right.
Okay, so just for example, in this specific case, it was January 22nd, 7:15 in the evening. Okay,
Okay.
7:15 in the evening. Okay, the weather was dark, Okay, so he's driving down the road. It's a 2-lane road, and one in each direction.
Okay.
And there comes a point in time where he crashes. This is a guy in his late 50s, maybe his 60s, and he crashes with another car, driven by a 17-year-old kid delivering pizza. Okay. Before he crashes, he's driving down the road. Then he swerves. So it's 1 lane in each direction. So he swerves across the opposing lane to the grass.
Hmm.
Then he comes back onto the road, and that's when he crashes to the
Oh, wow.
car as he's crossing the wrong lane.
Okay.
And he crashes. Okay, so both of them wound up in the hospital, and the 17-year-old dies, and the other one is just badly injured, but eventually recovers. Okay, so now the driver who swerved off the road and then crashed into the 17-year-old car is being held for vehicular homicide.
Okay.
So that's kind of the background.
Okay.
All right. So I was the state's expert. He had his own expert.
Of course.
So on his side, the experts, and then there were other experts, and I'll give you a little bit of examples. But on his side, his expert, of course, didn't have much to say, because you can only say so much based on what there is. So when these 2 victims went to the hospital, okay, they let's talk specifically about this one victim, the one who's being held.
Okay.
Went to the hospital. When they go to the hospital, the first thing that the hospital does is they take blood work. They take some blood, and then they do some testing, mainly for therapeutic analysis. That is to say, they want to know, is there anything in your blood, whatever it is, that might interfere with your treatment,
Hmm.
And so it's not for police work. It's for, for medical reasons.
Right.
All right. So on the one hand, they found that this fellow who's being held by the police has had alcohol in his system. So I told you blood is the important analysis factor. And he had blood in his system, and the level was 0.21. I'm not going to bore you with the units, because from driving that 0.08 is the limit for driving while intoxicated. So 0.21 is almost 3 times as much, right? So he's driving at he's driving. We know now how much was in his blood. We also know what time the blood sample was taken, and we also know the time the accident occurred. So now we can calculate backwards. Let's say it was a half an hour earlier that the accident occurred. We can calculate backward, knowing how the excretion rate of alcohol from blood occurs. We know, for example, there's on the average, for an average person, it's 1 glass per hour gets excreted from your blood. So we can figure out, basically, if we know what it was, the blood work was at a certain time, we can calculate backwards to what it was, let's say half an hour to an hour earlier. Okay. So we can always calculate, do a good analysis, good calculation. What most likely was the blood work at the time of the accident. So anyway, it was about 3 times as much as permitted. Okay. All right. So, and of course, on the other side, he couldn't argue with that, because that was black and white analysis. So the only thing he could say was, yeah, but it wasn't done for police work. So the chain of custody was broken.
Wow.
There was no chain of custody. There's no, people didn't sign out.
Wow.
Somebody could have tampered with it and all that. And on our side, we give arguments why those arguments are not good.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't do it, but another expert does. why it's very unlikely that anybody tampered with it because, you
Mhm.
know, and so they go through that. So that was his only argument. He couldn't argue about the numbers because that's black and white analysis.
Right.
So okay, so another thing that the other side said was, well, I only drank, he told the police, I only had 2 beers. So he stopped before the accident, he stopped at a bar, okay? And he said he had a couple of beers with the boys, okay? Okay, so we know it's impossible to have had only a couple of beers because a couple of beers will not give you 0.21. 0.21 is more like 7 or 8 beers. And then on top of that, so that was my part, to explain that to the jury. And besides that, the police were able to get a copy of the receipt at the bar that showed that he ordered 7 beers. His friends ordered 2 or 3, and he ordered 7.
Wow.
Or 7 drinks, whatever it was. So
Mhm.
which was consistent with what my calculation was.
Okay.
So we disproved his defense. You see, he
Right.
said, okay. So he said only 2 beers. No, that's not true. Not true because of the invoice on the one hand and the amount of alcohol in your system on the other. Another thing he said was, well, the reason I moved over, I was driving, and the reason I swerved to the right, to the left, was because a deer was crossing, and and I swerved to avoid the deer. So, police, a reconstruction expert, went back, and there was no evidence on his car of any collision with a deer, and 2, there was no evidence on the road of any tire marks that he's swerved or
That
anything
he
like
swerved
that,
or broke. Yeah.
or braked, or put his foot on the brake or anything like that. It was, and in fact, it was more like he drifted as opposed to swerved. Drifted off the road, kind of indicating that he may have fallen asleep at the wheel, And then when he got back on the road, like I said, he wasn't watching, and a car was coming, and he hit the car. So they were able, through another expert, to disprove that argument.
Right.
Okay, so now we have the blood work was this, the blood, basically the blood work indicated that he was drunk. He was very drunk because he had 3 times the allowed level. He did not swerve. All his arguments, in other words, were overcome,
Disproven.
and therefore now we know, and then we know from the scientific literature what we expect, the kind of impairment that we expect from somebody who's driving with a 0.21 alcohol in their system. Okay, and that's where the scientific analysis of the scientific literature comes in, which tells you exactly what sort of things we expect. For example, your reaction time is substantially reduced. Your visual acuity is reduced. You're sedated. There are a lot of things that occur at 0.21. There are also some things that occur at 0.08.
Right.
But those are more acceptable. But as you increase the alcohol level in your system, you get more and more severe side effects, if you will. And that's why they don't allow you above 0.08.
Right.
So we know from the scientific literature what we should expect, and basically that kind of explained how the accident occurred. And the bottom line about this whole thing is, what I'm telling you is that you don't just look at the numbers that the forensics provides you. You have to look at the total picture. That is to say, that the numbers on the one hand, the side effects, the scientific literature to indicate side effects, the circumstances of the death or the accident on the other. So it's a total picture, and in order to be able to determine and come to a conclusion, and so of what happened in this case, or how a person died on the other. So,
Right.
Sure enough, he was found guilty. Got a minimum of 2, not more than 10 years in prison, and and that's what happened with him. I'm looking at my notes just to make sure I didn't forget anything, but no, I did not. So that's pretty much what happened with that case. Any questions or anything? Or otherwise we can go on to another one.
Yeah, let's go on to one more, and then we can maybe have some questions based on those two cases.
Okay. So the other case. So what I'm saying is, forensics is not necessarily always death.
Right.
Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not, and sometimes you don't have numbers, you don't have forensic results, but then you have to look at the circumstances, clinical science,
Mm-hmm.
and other aspects of what happened. And to give you this example, this is a medical malpractice case.
Okay.
I believe that was in Mississippi. Yes, it was in Gulfport, Mississippi. June 2010. Okay. This man, I guess somewhere in his 50s or so, a picture. He comes into the emergency room of the hospital. He has diabetes and he's suffering from nausea and vomiting for the past 3 days. Okay, and some back pain. So they decided to admit him to the hospital. So I told you he has, he has diabetes, and they thought it was diabetes related. So, so to treat his pain, so he's admitted into the hospital, and they treat his pain. And to treat his pain, you see, he's vomiting. He has nausea and vomiting. So you can't give him an oral medication, because if you gave him an oral medication, he's vomiting, so you can vomit it all out.
Throw it
right?
out. Yeah.
So they give him. Let me take some of this champagne a moment. So they can't give him an oral. So they give him morphine intravenously for his pain. Okay, so give him morphine intravenously for his pain. And it seemed to be helping. And within 3 days, his vomiting and nausea subsides.
Okay.
His pain is somewhat reduced. He's ready to go home, but he's on intravenous morphine. So, they can't send him home with intravenous morphine. You can't do intravenous at home. So they have to switch him from intravenous to an oral morphine. Okay. And in order to do that, there's a certain method to it. I don't know. Many of you who are watching or listening here today, I know you've all been taking. Most likely, many of you have been taking pharmaceuticals. And when you get your pharmaceuticals, there's always some paperwork that they give you, about 20 different pages or something like that, with a lot of fine print. About all the side effects and everything of the drugs. But aside from that, which I know most of us don't read, but aside from that, it also tells you, the pharmacology of the drugs, tells you about dosages and whatnot. And in terms of morphine, what those pages also tell you is how to switch from an intravenous dose to an oral dose.
Okay.
And you can take different kind of oral morphine, the kind that every 4 hours, or one that takes you twice a day.
Okay.
But once the doctor decides which one he's going to give you, there's kind of a formula that tells you how to switch it. And by that I mean, you can't just say, I'm giving him 5 milligrams of intravenous, I'll give him 5 milligrams of the oral. No, it's not a 1-for-1, because the oral may be much more, much stronger, much more efficient, if you will. If you take it twice a day, it might be a different dose. So based on the dose and everything, it's a, the table, if you will, that's in that fine print will tell you how much to give.
Okay.
And also you don't want to like, you're giving the intravenous today, tomorrow to just take them off and put on the oral. That's not the way it works.
Right.
You have to kind of slowly titrate them.
Okay.
All right. So this way, eventually, you remove him from the intravenous and you only give him the oral. That's that's the object. So you can take the oral at home. Not this doctor. Okay.
Wow.
This doctor in this hospital, instead of reducing the intravenous while increasing the oral, with every day, he kept increasing both of them, so that by 7 days from the time that that the patient arrived at the hospital, 7 days later, the doctor gave him 7 times as much morphine than he gave him on day 1.
Wow.
Okay. So he was supposed to reduce one and increase the other, but he didn't. He just kept increasing both, and then within 7 days, he gave him 7 times as much. Now, on that 7th day, that patient went to the bathroom, never came out.
Wow.
They found him dead on the toilet. Okay. All right. So now they found him dead on the toilet. What happened? Right? Who's at fault? The family obviously sued the doctor and the hospital. I was the family's expert.
Okay.
And so we don't have any blood work because they didn't measure the amount of morphine in his blood. Okay. But we do have medical records, and in the medical records, which the lawyers are able to get from the hospital, it's a whole record about, we gave him so much on a certain day and so much, and then you can see in the record that, he gave him 7 times as much, but day 7, So you have the medical. So this is what I'm saying, that you have to look at the total picture of all the information that you have. So we don't have any blood work for morphine, but we do have what happened over the 7 days from the medical records. We know, so we know he gave him too much. We also know from the scientific literature how much that too much at the end was in the overdose range. Okay. Based on the scientific literature, which already discussed other cases, all right, because it's in peer-reviewed scientific literature. And last but not least, we also know that the patient died while on the commode, and there was a hard stool in the commode, which having what that's one of the side effects of morphine. Okay, constipation. All right, and when you're constipated, aside from being a hard stool, it can cause, as you're pressing down, trying to defecate, you are pressing down on your diaphragm, which in turn causes pressure in your chest cavity, which puts extra pressure on your heart. Okay, and if you have an issue with your heart, for example, it could affect the heart rhythm. And when I say issue, I don't mean necessarily that you have atherosclerosis, which causes a heart attack. Atherosclerosis is plaque in the arteries, in the heart arteries, coronary arteries, which in turn reduces the amount of oxygenated blood flowing in the heart to heart muscle. I'm not talking about that. That could cause a heart attack. I'm talking about the heart is under electrical impulses. Okay. And by increasing the pressure on the heart, it increases the pressure on the apparatus that causes the conduction of these electrical impulses on the heart, causing it what we call an arrhythmia, which is a change in the heart rhythm. Okay, and that can lead to death. So we don't know if that happened because that can't be measured. Okay, after death, an arrhythmia cannot be measured after death. But we know that he was in the overdose. He had a morphine overdose. We know that from the medical records. We know that from the scientific literature. We know he there's a clinical sign, which was the heart stool that he defecated. We know it was on the commode. We know you can get this increasing pressure on the heart that can lead to an arrhythmia, and therefore it's a more likely than not scenario for the way he died. And if you heard me right. We're talking about more likely than not. Right. When we provide testimony, this is not 100% because there's always questions that we can't answer. But the evidence tends to point more likely than not to one scenario that versus another, because the alternative is he just died, it was a coincidence,
Right.
or or maybe he died from a disease which he didn't have. So more likely than not, this is what happened, or something very close to that. And so there I am on the stand, okay, and I made these arguments. In this case, this was a case against in front of a judge with no jury.
Okay.
And I'm making these arguments, and then comes the other side, the other lawyer, the opposing lawyer, to ask me some questions. We already had a deposition previously, so he puts on the board an overhead slide saying, parts from the deposition, whatever it is. Well, you said that over here, whatever. And I told him, well, you got to scroll down and you'll see that I said more, whatever. And then after that, he kind of puts some sort of a table, a handwritten table that he made up. He says, well, then he says something to the effect that, well, that's all right, isn't it? Or something like that. Now, all this time, he's calling me Mr. Milman. Now, 14 years of college, more than 50 years experience. It's time you call me Dr.
Doctor.
Milman,
Yep.
And I understand sometimes it's a slip because, I'm not a real doctor, I'm just a PhD.
Yeah,
but,
just a PhD.
I just think I deserve it. So when he said, that's okay, isn't it? And I said, well, yeah, but except for one thing. And, I would appreciate if you call me Dr. Milman. And, that caught him a little bit off guard. So he kind of paused for a moment, and then he said something like, well, I'm sure if I forget, you'll remind me. And the judge pounced on him, a woman judge, she pounced on him and she said, Dr. Milman does not have to remind you. And,
nice.
and with that, he lost the case. And, I don't know if that had much to do with it, but the evidence was against him,
Yeah.
And so the doctor, of course, lost his job, credentials, and they also had to pay. This was a civil case because basically it was a mistake, if you will, a medical mistake. And so they had to pay, But
now I'm sorry to go back. In this case specifically, was there an autopsy done on the guy, or
no? To the best of my recollection, there was no autopsy. So it's all based on medical records,
right?
Scientific literature, circumstances of what happened, and what we know about morphine overdoses.
Now, in a case like that, is it customary to do an autopsy, or is it like at the family's discretion at that point? If there's no sign of, say, a homicide, if you just, found somebody dead in their bathroom, is it customary that if it's normal, not elderly related or something like that, that an autopsy would be performed, or no?
Right. So an autopsy is only performed is a requirement for which the family has no say when it's a homicide, for example, or a suspicious death. Okay. Otherwise, the family can agree or disagree to have one.
Okay. Gotcha.
In this case, this was not it happened in a hospital. It wasn't suspicious. It was basically a medical error, if you will.
Okay.
So there was no autopsy.
Gotcha.
And the only thing that we're really missing is blood work, but we already know from the medical records that it was elevated. Not because it was measured, but the way it was administered. So so sometimes, for those of you who are interested in forensics, sometimes you may not have the numbers, but you can still make a good educated guess, what's going on based on the information that you do have, which is medical, in this case, medical records, scientific literature, circumstances of what happened. Okay. So that's the story with that case. I hope that was an interesting case.
Yeah, it was. Absolutely. Yeah.
because like I said, most of my cases, about 90, 85 to 90% was civil, about 10% were criminal,
Mhm.
and the criminal tend to be, not always, but tend to be related to basically to vehicular homicide or something like that,
All right.
Okay.
So, because the other ones, when we think of criminal, we always think about shooting and stabbing,
Of
and
course.
for that you don't need me,
Mhm.
So I get involved in cases that basically have to do either with drugs or toxic chemicals.
Okay.
And toxic chemicals, they can either be toxic or they can either be cancerous or toxic because they're cancerous, or they could be toxic because they're not cancerous.
Mhm.
And those are different types of evaluation.
Okay.
It's for example, a cancerous one would be somebody working in a factory, finally, many years, got cancer.
Mhm.
Say the chemicals that he was exposed to in the factory causes cancer. Okay.
Gotcha.
No data, no testing. Okay, this is just circumstances,
Mhm.
right? I worked with these chemicals. So first of all, you got to find out what chemicals we're talking about
Mhm.
that it was involved with. Do these chemicals cause cancer? I've had cases where they say, well, they give me a list of about 250 chemicals that were in that factory, Surely one of
Wow.
them, that caused my cancer. And what kind of cancer did you have? Well, I had, let's say, liver cancer. Well, none of these chemicals cause liver cancer.
Wow.
Okay. So, yes, some of them cause cancer, but not liver cancer, Now you might find another expert will say, fine,
Mhm.
I'll take that and give you give you an analysis why, even though that you don't have anything that shows liver cancer, nevertheless, they're carcinogens.
Mhm.
I need a little bit more proof
Understood. Yeah.
for me. I don't like to take either the victims or the lawyer's money, if I can't help them with their case. So,
Mhm.
so, and I tell them up front, I tell them this is as much as I can say. And so, like the Roundup case, we all remember the Roundup case.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in that, but I know a little bit about it.
Right.
And frankly, it's good I wasn't involved because I wouldn't have made the same argument.
Mhm.
But just quickly, in that case, this was somebody who was using Roundup, and he spilled the whole thing on his leg, and
Ooh, yeah.
the pesticide on his leg. And sometime later, he got cancer on that leg,
Mhm.
and so he put them together. But when you look at the data, there's no evidence that the chemical that he was talking about in Roundup causes that kind of cancer in humans.
Right.
The EPA and others, they have a hierarchy of how they evaluate the cancer data and what they conclude. So the worst case scenario is the chemical is a human carcinogen. That means that the chemical has been shown to cause cancer in humans. And the next level would be it's a probable human carcinogen. That means there's no evidence in humans, but we have evidence in animals. Okay. All right. So when it's a probable human carcinogen, it's we don't have evidence in humans. We have it in animals. Okay, and that's good, but it doesn't tell you that. Let's say if it causes liver cancer in animals, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to cause liver cancer in humans.
Exactly.
It can cause a different kind of cancer. So that's what I'm saying. And with the Roundup, they didn't have evidence in humans; they only had in animals, and then they also had some evidence about absorption of the chemical through the skin. So they made those kind of arguments to say that Roundup causes cancer, but I don't know that. It passed the jury and they agreed, but I don't know that I would have made those arguments. You know what I mean? So I think for me, I would needed to see that chemical in the Roundup caused human cancer on the one
Yeah.
hand, and preferably his kind of cancer. you know?
So in that case, so if you are contacted, say, by the prosecution, in a type case like that, and one that you don't agree with your findings, could you then be reached out to by the defense to testify on the opposite side of things?
Yeah, so it's basically I'm sitting at home, and then one day the phone rings, and it just depends who calls me first, kind of thing. And and the lawyer calls me, and he gives me a little bit of a background, and sometimes I can tell him right away, I don't think you have a case, and other times I just need more information. So then I have to charge him for my time and effort. But if I can tell him right away, I tell him right away. Some people say I shouldn't do that. I should get paid, but. It's kind of a toss-up between having him feel comfortable with me on the one hand, and going just for the dollars on the other. So I try. If I listen to the case, and sometimes a lot of times, I would say about 10% of those phone calls, I tell them, I don't think you have a case. And of course at that time somebody else can call me. Defense or otherwise.
Yeah. So real
Also-
quick, I'm sorry. Real quick, you mentioned that in the Roundup case that it caused cancer in animals but not in humans. So we have kind of a follow-up question to that. So if you have something that does cause cancer in a lab animal, would you feel comfortable taking something like that or prescribing something like that if you know it doesn't affect humans in that same way?
Okay, so the person is asking me, should you take a pill that that causes cancer in animals? Okay, so first of all, chemicals. We have, as we know, what we know about chemicals and cancer, we primarily talk about environmental chemicals. That environmental chemicals cause cancer. Vinyl chloride. Tetrachloroethylene, you name it. But we have to remember that pharmaceuticals are chemicals also.
Right.
Okay, they're also chemicals. They're just given this fancy name, pharmaceuticals. As something that helps you.
Right.
And they, for the most part, they do. But we also know that they have side effects. And now one of the side effects, let's say in this specific example, is that it can cause cancer. It has been shown to cause cancer in animals. Okay. The first assumption is if it can cause cancer in animals, it can also cause cancer in humans. That's the first assumption.
Okay.
For safety's sake, that's what we assume. Okay. It may not be proven, but it just shows that if it can do it in animals, therefore it has the ability to cause cancer, and therefore it can also potentially cause cancer in humans. All right. So now, should you take it or not? So on the one hand, you already know it causes cancer in animals. It may cause cancer in humans. Now, so now you have two things to think about. The first one is what we talk about is risk versus benefit. Okay, the risk-benefit ratio. How badly do you need this specific drug? For example, cancer chemotherapy. Okay,
Right.
cancer chemotherapy are also carcinogens. Those are drugs that also cause cancer. On the one hand, they help you, but on the other hand, they can cause cancer. But they may not necessarily will, but they may cause cancer 10, 20 years down the road. You do nothing, you have cancer today, and you can die within 5 years.
Okay.
So you make that risk-benefit analysis, and you say, well, I'll take it and take my chances. It's the 20 years down the road, but I get 20 years. Here and it may not happen. Okay, so you have to decide what the risk-benefit. Okay, that's on the one hand. I forget what you want to say about the other one, but it's the risk-benefit. The other thing is, like I said, you don't know. The thing I told you my background. I'm a pharmacist. I was a licensed pharmacist for 30 years, PhD in pharmacology, work in cancer treatment. I'm against personally. Okay, I'm not saying what anybody else should do. Okay, but I try to take, for me, the less I say you are what you eat. Okay,
Yes.
Mhm.
the less you put in your mouth, the better off you are. Right.
Right.
So and I'm not espousing for anybody else to follow my example, but for me, because I don't want to get in trouble with any doctor or AMA. All right. Okay. So I'm not telling you what to do. I am not a medical doctor. I'm not a physician. Okay. But for me, there are many times you know how doctors, what the doctors do, and all the power to them. They're very good for what they do. But in the end, in terms of treatment, they have surgery, they have, radiation, whatever, depending on the situation, obviously. And then they have pharmaceuticals. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's it. So they always think basically in these three areas. Okay. So when you come in for a cold, let's say, okay, they don't want you walking out empty handed, knowing that you are going to get better if you just wait it out a little bit. 10
Right.
days. Okay. So they give
Right.
you have the sniffles, not a problem. We'll give you an antihistamine. You have this, you have that. We'll give you these 2-3 drugs.
Mhm.
Something that for me, that's what they do. They want to do that. And so I
Right.
take it, but I never use it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Antibiotics. Yes, I take antibiotics. Why?
Mhm.
Because they work specifically against the bacteria.
Mhm.
But all these symptomatology kind of pharmaceuticals, I don't. And I will
Yeah.
also tell you that the thing that really upsets me is that there are a lot of pharmaceuticals that are, and again, this is me, there are a lot of pharmaceuticals that are, they're put out there, they are approved by FDA and all that, but all the testing is not necessarily, it was done at that moment.
Mhm.
Later
Mhm.
to find out other things.
Right.
For
Yep.
example, many years back, women were told take estrogen,
Yep.
to prevent breast cancer. Women took it 3 to 5 years, whatever it is. Then they said, "Oh, estrogen causes cancer.
Mhm.
Stop."
Mhm.
Yep.
Well, give me a break. I did what you said, and now
Right.
you tell me I shouldn't do it because it causes cancer, but you're not getting penalized for it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
the doctor, or the pharmaceutical companies, or whatever.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with some male pharmaceuticals. Later, they find out that they cause cancer.
Mhm.
Uh, or even a simple thing like let's say baby aspirin. They came out. They At some point they came out with the idea that you should take. If you are at a risk of a heart attack, then take baby aspirin. It'll prevent clotting. It will help you against heart attack. So in
Mhm.
my specific case, and again, this is just me. My father passed away from a heart attack when he was 55. Okay, I reached 55. I was very very cognizant of that age,
Yeah.
and every little bit, of whatever, I kind of start worried. Is this it? Is this it? So my physician said, take aspirin, baby aspirin. So I've been taking it. Well, many years later, it doesn't cause cancer, but many years later, they say if you stop, one, you don't need to take it. It's not going to do anything if you don't have
Mhm.
if you don't have a risk. And two, if you stop, it can
It-
expedite
Yeah.
Increase. Yeah.
you having a heart attack because it'll increase blood clotting, whatever. So don't stop. Well, here I am. I'm taking this drug that I didn't need to take to start with, and now I'm taking it for life.
Right.
And I don't
Yeah.
want. I want to take less rather than
Mhm.
more. And but I'm doing what my doctor tells me, and my doctor, I guess, is giving you the best advice at the time, but he doesn't have
Mhm.
all the information because it wasn't
Right.
developed yet.
Mhm.
Right.
So
Right.
that whether it's on side effects or on cancer of chemicals, but
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
general, that's why I say the less you put in your mouth, the better off you are.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if whatever it is, you have to weigh the pros and cons, the benefits and risks
Yeah,
of doing it.
absolutely. I mean, because as you know, I mean, the human body, it's amazing, right? And it's designed to do what it needs to do to survive. And so to put extra things in there that is not necessary, to your point, speaking for myself, I avoid it as
Mhm.
much as possible.
Yes.
Um,
So now you really hit my best part, which is basically I agree with you completely. The human body is, for all intents and purposes, is a complicated machine, and we have everything. We have everything in the body that you need in order to survive. Although at times it needs help, I
mhm.
agree with that. So, for example, You cut your finger, not a problem. The body has a mechanism by which it heals it by clotting. Okay,
Mhm.
you have your immune system that can combat certain ailments.
Absolutely.
Other ailments, it might need help. Okay,
Mhm.
and that's where antibiotics, for example, just in case, I'm sure everybody knows, but just in case, as a review, it works specifically on the bacteria.
Yep.
The bacteria has a human cell has an outer membrane. Okay, so inside the cell we have the liquid portion and the nucleus. The liquid portion called the cytoplasm, and the nucleus, but it's made, the outer layer is a membrane, whereas in bacteria it's what's called a cell wall, much thicker. Okay, so different antibiotics work different ways, but they basically work with affecting the synthesizing or the making of the cell wall in bacteria, but not on the membrane of human cells. So they're very specific for bacteria. So basically they interfere with making the cell wall in bacteria. So the bacterial cell wall is leaky, and their inner portion, the cytoplasm, the liquid part, starts leaking out, and that's how the bacteria dies. And so that's the cool part about antibiotics. It works specifically against the organism and keeping the human cell free.
Free.
Unlike cancer drugs, for example, that try to be specific for the cancer cells, but they're not. Depending on drugs, some more so than others, and so that's why they affect both, and that's why you have all these major side effects with cancer chemotherapy. All right, but again, you do it because of the risk versus benefit analysis. So you take them.
Yeah.
So, but I agree. I always say the human body is a complicated machine. We have everything that's required. Needs help at times, and we give it. And every time we take a pharmaceutical, it has pluses and minuses to it. And basically, between the pharmaceutical company, the FDA, what you try to do is maximize the benefit and minimize the side effects. They call it side effects because it's a nice, fancy, easy term to swallow. But the fact is, these side effects are toxic effects. They're toxic effects. So they find a dose of the pharmaceuticals that is beneficial, but maintains those quote unquote side effects at a minimal level. Yeah. And some of them, if you look at those sheets that I was telling you about, some of them they say are rare. For example, blindness. And once in a while, I get a client took this drug, is blind, and now wants to say it's the pharmaceutical that gave me the blindness that I took it. And how do you prove that? Because it's a rare occurrence,
Right.
By the way, on the other thing I want to say on the cancer issue, for the fellow who's asking me about taking the drug. So it's not only the risk benefit, it's also the how much and for how long.
Right.
Yeah.
So if if it's a drug that basically, maybe there's another one that's safer that you're going to be taking, forever, maybe you don't, the first thing the doctor will tell you is, oh, it's a small dose. Well, yeah, small dose every day is a large dose at the end of the week.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So again, it's a risk benefit analysis on the one hand. How beneficial is it that, and are there substitutes that are less risky, and basically you have to analyze it between you and your doctor. I always say it doesn't matter what the expert is, whether it's a medical or a plumber or electrician, you better know just as much as he does, if not more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to jump back quickly to the beginning of your story, where you said that you worked on the Native American reservation out there. Now, obviously Native Americans have a lot of beliefs in ancient healings or natural healings. Since you said that you were one of the first pharmacists out there, what was the reaction to what you were prescribing versus how they healed with natural elements?
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I was the first pharmacist on the reservation.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you're using your words loosely, but I don't prescribe. Only physicians prescribe. I
Right.
dispense.
Okay, yeah.
So
Sorry.
so
Yeah.
so the physician prescribes. I dispense. Um, my reservation. So that there are like 3 reservations within 90 miles of each other.
Mhm.
I didn't know what I was getting into because I was New York City. 9 million people. I didn't even know where Minnesota was. I was 25. I remember, like I said, within we got married on 3 weeks' notice.
Right.
They contacted me and said 3 weeks from now you have to be over there, and so we decided to get married.
Mhm.
We looked at the map. Where's Minnesota, whatever. So had we known that Minnesota is 40 below, that there's nobody there, but snow and trees, we might have tried to pick a different reservation, like in the South or something like that.
There you go.
But on the plus side, I'd say it was a good experience, something I can laugh about it now.
Mhm.
And not everybody has that kind of experience, or something you could tell your kids, grandkids.
Right.
And also made us appreciate civilization, because because we were, like I said, just 3 houses. The nearest town was 30 miles away. Sometimes you can't drive because it was snowing. Maybe exaggerating a little bit, but about 10 months out of the year, you have that 2
Mhm.
weeks of summer.
Mhm.
But the point is, our reservation, the one I was at, was very mixed blooded.
Mhm.
It was Chippewa and Norwegians, who kind of mixed together.
Okay.
The other 2 reservations were more full blooded, if you will.
Okay.
So, and they had more issues in that vein. I remember in one case, those had a hospital. Mine was only a clinic.
Mhm.
So that hospital, one time the patient died, and then all the Native Americans, they all circled the doctor's house, and we're going to cause all sorts of trouble, that to the point that he had to be transferred to another reservation.
Oh my goodness.
So, but in my case, so as you can imagine, very small town kind of thinking. You don't kiss your wife in the morning, everybody knows about it. It's like a kind of discussion. That day. So, and I came from 9 million people. In New York.
Right. Right.
Especially back then, you don't even say hello. You don't. That's why I like Maryland. Everybody's friendly, and you say good morning, and all that. So I came from that kind of a background, not
Right.
used to the small town background.
Right.
So I had my own. I don't know whether I got into trouble, but for example, I liked photography. That got me a little bit into trouble, but the doctor always managed to smooth things out for me.
There you go.
But it was an experience, and
Mhm.
I did give some courses to the Native Americans about how to take pharmaceuticals and what they mean, and
Mhm.
side effects and that sort of thing. I gave some seminars for them, but
Mhm.
basically they were interested in hunting and fishing.
Mhm.
Hunting and fishing is over there,
Right.
and that was the big deal. And then wild rice. Ricing, there's like a 2-week window, sometime in the summer, and everything stops to go wild ricing. They may have a full-time job, but they leave, for that, because they make more money ricing.
Yeah.
The way that works, I don't know if you guys are
Yeah.
interested, but there are different lakes, and they have the wild rice kind of grows on the perimeter of the lake, and
Mhm.
you go with a boat, and you get close to the rice stalks, and then you pound them to get the rice to fall into the boat. And
Mhm.
you have a certain time period, and at the end, you scoop it all up, and and so some lakes have more rice than other lakes, and you want to get into that good lake.
Of course.
It's kind of a lottery, and if you get it, you have to be there all the time.
Mhm.
When it's season. So if you don't, you lose your spot. So you can see why they give up their job or whatever it is in order to be at the lake for that
Yeah, of
rice.
course.
So and wild rice, not the kind you buy here, in the boxes, but the original, is very tasty and very good. Comes from Minnesota. So, and the reason I say that is because I had some there, and then I had for a while they shipped it out to me over here in Maryland at the beginning, because it was really good. But over here, the kind that you get from Uncle Ben or whatever,
It's a little bit different.
Yeah, because in part they mix the because wild rice is very expensive, so they mix it with the white rice, and it's just different.
Yeah.
So now you got a little bit more than you wanted, but more than you ever wanted to know. But and of course it has nothing to do with forensics.
That's okay. We like these little tangents sometimes.
Yeah, but no. So it's a different kind of life there, but it's interesting because in case anybody didn't know, and I'm not going to make this major announcement, but I am Jewish, and and that was unusual on an Indian reservation.
Oh yeah.
To me, again, from New York, what do I know?
Right.
Didn't make any difference. And but I was working. I was in the clinic in my pharmacy, and they coming in to get the prescription refilled, and I wasn't there. Okay, I wasn't in my room, and so shortly thereafter I come, and I said, oh, sorry, I was over by the coffee pot getting a cup of coffee, and they said, we didn't know Jews drink coffee. We thought we only drink tea. So this was this is how much they knew about the outside world. So it was a matter of a little bit kind of
different, yeah,
different. And,
different cultures.
Right. And the nearest town was 30 miles away, and they had 3 Jewish families somehow got lost over there. And they heard that a Jewish pharmacist came to the reservation. So one day I'm coming back from wherever I was, and there was a car in my driveway. It was one of those families. And so we were in our mid-20s, and these people were like in their 50s, I guess. And so anyway, they took us under their wing, and every weekend when we went to town, they always wanted us to stop over there, and they each
have tea.
Yeah, and each one one family owned a hide and fur skinning factory, because the furs would come in from Canada. And then they would be skinned in Minnesota, and then the other family owned a army surplus store. So it was very nice because, like I said, we were in our 20s, and they were much older, and you needed that parental advice, if you will, once in a while, and they kind of took us under the wings and made life, things go a little bit easier.
There you go. Well, Harry, listen, you are just a great guest. We love talking to you. But we want everybody to know, because you do a great job of explaining things. And I think that's why your books are so popular, Forensic 1 and Forensic 2. So just, again, tell everybody where you can find, where they can find the books and the next couple of appearances, because I know you're not going to be too far from us in Georgia here soon.
Yeah. So first of all, you can see there my 5 books. My 2 forensics books. The first one is Forensics: The Science Behind the Deaths of Famous People. That describes the deaths of 23 famous people in the entertainment industry: Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Robin Williams, Carrie Fisher, and many others. And then by popular demand, I published another one, the sequel. You don't have to read the first one to read the second one. They're standalone books, but the second one is called Forensics 2, The Science Behind the Deaths of Famous and Infamous People. And that reviews the toxicology and autopsies of 36 famous and infamous people like George Washington, Napoleon, Rasputin, Jeffrey Epstein, Kurt Cobain, Jerry Garcia, Mickey Mantle, Johnny Carson, Aretha Franklin, and many others. And both those two books, as well as my two mystery novels, they're all available on online at various online stores, including, in this case, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and the two forensics books are also on forensicsfamouspeople.com.
Okay.
So those are the 4 books, and in terms of my future my future book signing events, I will have 3 book signing events, all at Barnes and Noble, in June. The first one is on June 9, which is at Barnes and Noble in Huntsville, Alabama.
Mhm.
That's a Friday. The second one is at Barnes and Noble in Cumming, Georgia. That's on Saturday, June 10. And last but not least, it's Barnes and Noble in Charlotte Arboretum on Sunday, June 11. So June 9, 10, and 11, Huntsville, Alabama, Cumming, Georgia, followed by Charlotte Arboretum. And you can get more information on my Facebook page, Harry A. Milman. Send me a friend request. We'll be friends forever.
Mhm.
Or send me an email, milmanauthor@gmail.com.
Yep.
Wonderful. And that's what I was going to ask, is if you actually had a place that you had listed, excuse me, your appearance dates.
Mhm.
Yes, all my events are listed on my Facebook page. So you can see them there. I have I believe 8 or 10 events between now and Christmas. I'll also be just as for those who are from the Midwest, I will be in Texas in December. I'll be in Pennsylvania various times of the year. So again, it's all on my Facebook page.
Mhm.
And is that the author one or your personal one?
I'm sorry.
Is that the author page or your personal?
Yeah, so I list them in both places.
Okay, great.
So you can
Great.
find me either Harry A. Millman, my personal page, or Harry A. Millman author on my author page. And
Oh, there they are.
there's the
There
list
they
right
are.
there.
Yeah, there they are.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's on both pages, and I got people, following me from all over the world. They're buying my books online. They're all
Yeah.
waiting for Forensics 3. So if you did-
Because
if you-
they are great. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you didn't have enough after reading 1 and you read then number 2, which together now is 59 people reviewed, the deaths of 59 people, you will now read Forensics 3 will be available in about a year or so.
Perfect.
I would say send me your name and email and your location, so I can add you to my list and let you know when it's published. So
Mhm.
send it to milmanauthor@gmail.com. And Forensics 3, unlike the first 2 that were about famous people or infamous people, Forensics 3 is going to be about not so famous people.
Okay.
So it's going to be Forensics 3. The subtitle would be, "They got their 15 minutes of fame from the way they died."
Wow.
Nice.
it's
Okay,
people-
that's going to be fun.
Yeah, people who were not famous, but got their 15 minutes of fame from their death, but not from their life.
Very cool. That's going to be a great
That'll
twist,
be a
Harry.
great
Nice
book.
job.
Thank you. Because I think that in general, I find that you learn more about people from their autopsies than from their
Mhm.
biographies.
Yeah,
So-
very cool. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Well,
I
listen,
think it's
everybody.
like that too.
Well, I am glad that I had the pleasure to personally meet you. Everybody, if you're watching, go to one of Harry's book signing events. They are really fun. He's going to be the guy in Barnes and Noble in the tuxedo. You can't miss him. He'll definitely talk about his life and his books. And like you said, you'll leave friends. Because
Yes.
I mean, we've spoken to you several times since then, and it's always a pleasure.
Yes, and if you want to hear more about Harry, he was on my previous podcast, The Ghost Biker Garage, over on the Ghost Biker Explorations Facebook and YouTube channel, and we talked in depth about his books. And so if you want to hear more of those interviews, we definitely suggest you go check that out.
Mhm.
Also, check out the show notes there, because we've got the links to his books, his Instagram page, his 2 Facebook pages. Definitely go check that out and follow him and buy his book.
Yeah, they are really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I support everything you said. And but seriously, as far as I'm concerned, it's not whether you buy the book or not, because we're going to be friends no matter what you do. So just find me, come to the book signing event. I know you're going to have a good time. If you buy the book, that's great. If you're not, somebody else will, and you might buy it next time. And so my books are always available online anyway. But if you want an autographed copy, you'll have to come to the book signing event. I do have some copies of Forensics 2 in soft cover that you, if you'd like to have autographed, I can have it shipped to you. The cost for shipping would be for the book plus shipping is $40 for the soft cover alone of Forensics 2. And it will be autographed, a personal autograph. So if you're interested in that, send me an email. And if you're not, like I said, don't worry about it. We'll still be friends.
Nice.
Well, Harry, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time tonight to speak with us. And like I said, it is always a pleasure. We learn so much from you, and it's just a really fun conversation.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Harry. And thank you everyone so much for taking the time to sit with us tonight and ask questions in the chat room. Next week, we will also have another author on, Miss Lori Yaney. She is going to be on. She's going to be talking about her time as a law enforcement officer, or excuse me, a law enforcement worker, and also how she, some of the books that she's written based on those experiences. And then she also has a paranormal twist to those that she'll be talking about. And then we will not have a show the very next week because we have a private event that's going to be taking place the full weekend here at the jail. So we will be closed those days and will not have a show. And then after that, we will return back to our normal series that we've been covering this year as far as visiting other jails and other historic locations that we've been talking about. And that one will be in Mississippi that we'll be covering.
Yep. So everybody, once again, thank you so much, Harry. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a fantastic evening.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being invited.
Yep, absolutely. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.